start the video. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Eunice Kim. I'm a long-range planning manager for the city of Salem and also the project manager for the Our Salem project. There's a lot of staff here to help answer questions, and I'll let them quickly introduce themselves. I think Lisa, Austin, Patricia, Julie, if I left anyone out, please feel free to introduce yourselves.
Julie Warnicki, Transportation Planning Manager.
Great. Hi,
I'm
Lisa Anderson. Oh, sorry, Austin. Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, Planning Administrator.
Austin Ross, Long Range Planner.
Great. So today is the second to last, what was going to be a policy meeting for the Our Salem project, but given all of the interest in the interactive map and the proposed zoning changes, it's actually going to be a zoning forum. We really mean this meeting to be a time and place for you all to ask questions, give comments, and just let us know kind of what your thoughts are on things. And we're going to start though with a Q&A, a frequently asked questions portion, which I'll talk about in a second. So I'm going to I always start with a brief overview, let people know kind of what the Our Salem project is. So I will do that. But then again, we've been getting a lot of questions from the community. And so we've tried to compile some of those to answer some of them early in this presentation. And then again, the end will just be Q&A and time for you all to ask questions. So just as a reminder, the Our Salem project is a multi-year project to update our comprehensive plan. This is the large framework really that frames how we grow and develop in the future. It includes goals, policies, and a map that again guide our growth, manage our growth, and shape the future of the community. We've talked a lot in previous Wednesday meetings about different policies and different topics, housing, transportation, economic development, the environment. And today we're really going to be focusing on, again, the map. If you have questions about specific policies, I would ask that maybe you hold those until the end if there's time to get to those. So where are we in this multi-year project? We reached a major milestone in March where we brought a draft vision to the council and asked for acceptance. That draft vision included high-level goals across a broad range of topics, again, housing, transportation, natural resources, parks and recreation, and that was really based on all of the input that we'd received from the community over the last year and a half, 2 years. Those goals, as well as a proposed comprehensive plan map, were in the Our Salem vision document that we brought to council. And at that point, we were really asking council, are we headed in the right direction? Is this a general framework that we should be kind of operating under as we dive into the details of policies, zoning, etc.? So council did accept that vision. It was not an adoption process, so nothing is final, but it did provide us the direction to keep going on the project and to dive into those details. As I mentioned earlier, we've been having these weekly meetings mostly focused on, or all focused really on policies, but today we're really going to be focusing on zoning and the zoning map. So I'm going to dive into just some of the questions we've been hearing from the community. Some are technical, some are more have to do with specific zones. The first is just a quick, how do we use the interactive map? And I think we can drop a link into the chat. Hopefully you've all had a chance to see it. But we can kind of walk through how you get more details on the map. So folks have been able to find the map, but sometimes they're wondering, well, if I see something that says neighborhood hub or mixed use 2 or commercial, what does that actually mean? So on the next screen, we'll show you kind of what we are talking about. So if you click on a property, you can see what the proposed zone changes. And this is just an example of the neighborhood hub. There's a little link, and I know it's small, and I apologize for that, that says click here for additional information. And if the zone currently exists, so if it's like the single family residential, multifamily, it will take you to the actual zoning code on that for that specific zone. If we don't have if it's a new zone that we're proposing, it will take you to a overview that we have written on the proposed zone. So the neighborhood hub, for example, would be a new zone. The R4 would be a new zone. The mixed use 3 would be a new zone. So all of those, if you click on those, will take you to, again, a kind of 2-page overview. And I should say, if you have questions as we go, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then maybe we'll take a pause and start answering them. Or if you have a specific question about how to use the map, feel free to drop it in the chat. And then in the interactive map, obviously, beyond just trying to show what the proposal is to the community, its real purpose is to get input from you all, from the community. And so we've created an opportunity where you can basically click on a push pin, drop it somewhere on the map, and let us know, what do you think? You can write comments, you can suggest a different zone, and if you'd like to leave your name and your zip code, you can, but that's optional. So a lot of people have been providing a lot of comments already on the map, and I'll touch on this later, but we're proposing to leave the map open to comments through June 11th. So a lot of the questions we're getting are about, is this all final? What you see on the map, is that what we're bringing through the adoption process, which we hope to start at the end of the year? And the answer is no. The proposed zone changes are not final. The reason that we put out the map is that we want to get input from the community to see what everyone thinks. This map does reflect the proposed comprehensive plan map that was in the vision document, but we are hoping to get comments so that we can make revisions before we go through the adoption process. The goal is to start that adoption process by the end of the year. That adoption process will have public hearings before the Planning Commission as well as the City Council, and ultimately it would be the zoning map or the proposed zone changes would need to be approved by the City Council to be effective. So we're in the preliminary phase of getting input on the zoning map. Another question we're getting is the city going to buy and develop these properties? Are we interested in buying a land that's proposed to be changed to multifamily to actually develop that housing? And the answer is no. There's no plan for the city to buy all these properties and to develop them. And a proposed zone change also would not require a property owner to sell their property or to actually develop it. So for example, if there's a single family home and we're proposing a zone change, that single family home can stay. No one has to sell. You don't have to develop your property. It is creating the opportunity to do that in the future if you wanted to sell or you wanted to redevelop your property. Are developers proposing the zoning changes? No. There are a couple instances where people have given suggestions, and so we've taken that input as we're taking input from the broader community. But this proposed zoning map is based on the proposed comprehensive plan map that, again, is in the vision document. That document and that map was really based on all the input that we've received from the community over the last year and a half, 2 years in our visioning process. So if you remember, there was a lot of dot voting. We had different scenarios where we asked, do you want to see multifamily here or mixed use here? We had surveys. We've had community outreach throughout the community at different events and meetings, and we used all of that input to inform the proposed comprehensive plan map, which then informs this proposed zoning map. So will zone changes increase my property taxes? That's a frequent question we've been getting. So we've had conversations with the assessors who've confirmed that no, a proposed change or an actual zone change on your property doesn't increase the assessed value. It doesn't trigger a reassessment. The thing that actually is the trigger is if a property is rezoned, say it's rezoned from single family to multifamily. That change alone doesn't have an impact. If you actually then develop your property for multifamily housing and that specific type of housing was not allowed in your previous zone, so the single family zone, that is what would actually trigger the reassessment. So another example would be, say you have a zone that's multifamily, but we're proposing mixed use, and there's a new retail use that is allowed in mixed use that's not currently allowed in multifamily. The zone change alone, again, isn't a trigger, but if you then redevelop your property for a use like a restaurant that wasn't currently allowed in the existing zone, that is the trigger. So they pointed us to the state law. It's listed here on the slide, ORS 308.146. That shows what those triggers are. And this one says your property has to be zoned and used for as a new use that would create the change. So I hope that clarifies that answer. I know a lot of people have asked for that in writing. And so when I asked the assessors for that in writing, they pointed me to state law because, again, it's statewide. Another question we're getting is why are we rezoning the parks, our existing parks, to PA, public amusement? And this came up early in our process, I think maybe last year, I think last year. Well, some of our existing parks were zoned PA, which is the zone that's intended for parks, but some others were zoned specifically like residential. And so there was some concern from neighborhoods and others that if our parks are zoned residential, they could be redeveloped into housing. And while they're city owned, and I know there's a lot of other restrictions, we wanted to just make it very clear that the intention is to leave them as parks. And so we're proposing to rezone them to public amusement. And feel free, anyone else, to jump in, staff, if I'm leaving any details out. So another question we're asking is, why are we proposing to rezone so much land to multifamily? And if you've been part of this process, you'll know that we have a projected need for more multifamily housing land. And so we did a housing needs analysis several years ago that showed we have enough land within our urban growth boundary to meet our projected needs for population and for jobs, but it's not designated the right way. So we have a lot of, for example, single family land, but we don't have enough multifamily land. And so we've been trying to kind of chip away at that multifamily need through other changes. So we started allowing accessory dwelling units, for example. We, in the last couple of years, finished a multifamily housing design project that was really looking at streamlining the process and making it easier to develop multifamily housing where it is allowed today. But in addition to that, we need to actually look for land where new multifamily housing can be developed in the future. And so we know we have that need. And so we've looked across the community for land that could meet that need. So there's also been questions of kind of how did you pick land? And there's also been questions on why are we not just focusing on our corridors and our downtown? Isn't there enough vacant property to meet our need? And the answer is no. We are obviously looking at redeveloping or creating the opportunities to redevelop or reuse existing property, both downtown and along our corridors, like Commercial Street, for example, for housing to go there. So you'll notice on our proposed zoning map, for example, we have a lot of proposed changes to mixed use along our corridors, again, like Commercial and Lancaster, where we're hoping to make it easier for folks to develop housing. But that is not enough to just have assumptions for redevelopment, for example. We do actually have to look for additional land. And so we are looking for land throughout Salem. One of the things we heard throughout our outreach over the last, again, year and a half, 2 years, is that folks didn't really want to see multifamily housing concentrated in one neighborhood versus another. And so we are trying to distribute that new multifamily land across the community. We are looking for vacant properties. So to meet our need, we need to find partially vacant and vacant properties to actually count that land towards our multifamily need in the future. And so we're not looking to just rezone single family land that's currently developed with a home to multifamily. We really are looking for vacant or partially vacant land to rezone. We're looking for areas that are near shops, services, schools, jobs, transit, and mixed use areas. And so every location where we're proposing multifamily doesn't meet every single kind of criteria where we would say this is the perfect location. In some cases, maybe it's near a park and a school, but maybe it's not near transit, or maybe it's near transit and a school, but it's not near shops, or what have you. And in areas where we're proposing multifamily, where there isn't currently services, we are trying to combine that with a proposal for mixed use, which would allow services, shops, jobs, close to that multifamily. Because another thing we've heard is that, why are you putting multifamily out on the edges? And one of the reasons is that's frankly kind of where the vacant land is. And so we're trying to say, if we were to put new multifamily out in these areas that aren't maybe close to Commercial Street or close to the downtown, could we create a mixed use center that then serves that multifamily housing? So we've also heard the inverse. So the question is, why are there some areas that we are proposing to downzone to single family? And you'll see this in some areas where the existing zoning is duplex residential. And so that's a zone that we currently have that allows for duplexes. But House Bill 2001 that was passed a couple of years ago is going to require us to allow middle housing. So that's duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters and townhouses in the single family zone. And in particular, duplexes would be allowed on every lot that a single family home is allowed on. So right now, our minimum lot size for a single family home is 4,000 square feet. And so we would allow a duplex on 4,000 square feet. And that is a code change that we are proposing to bring through the adoption process, hopefully this summer. We have a work session with the council or the Planning Commission actually June 1st. So that's kind of the first time we'll be going through the code language. So that really has created the opportunity to get rid of the duplex residential zone. It's no longer necessary. So you'll see on the map that we're proposing to downzone that to single family. There's a couple areas where we've heard concerns about displacement, where there's an existing single family home or single family neighborhood that in past projects in years past was rezoned to multifamily. And there's been concerns that that multifamily zoning would then be an incentive for developers to come in, kind of take down a bunch of homes and redevelop larger multifamily housing. And so there's a couple areas where, again, it's an existing single family home or single family neighborhood where we've proposed to downzone it to single family. So other questions we've heard has to do with the neighborhood hub. And the neighborhood hub is an idea, again, that really came out of this visioning process where folks really want to be able to walk to some neighborhood services. So small shops, think about like a coffee shop, a barber, a bookstore within their single family neighborhood or their existing residential neighborhood. So they can more easily access those by foot and not have to drive to downtown or necessarily drive to Commercial Lancaster to meet all of their daily needs. So the neighborhood hub really came out of that conversation. And as is proposed today, the neighborhood hub would be a new zone that allows for all the same uses in the single family zone, but in addition to that, allows for small scale shops and services. So these are a couple pictures that show potentially what a hub could look like. A hub could be an existing home that is converted into a business, or could be a new building on a vacant piece of property that meets the kind of design standards that are currently proposed for a hub. So one of the things we did here when we did our outreach on the neighborhood hub idea was that folks wanted them to kind of be the same scale and size of single family homes. So they would be capped in terms of height, the same height as a single family home, so 35 feet. They didn't want them to take over neighborhoods and be large scale, big box stores. And so we're proposing to cap the square footage of them. People also didn't want to see large parking lots in front, so it wouldn't look like a strip mall. So we're proposing that the parking be located behind or to the side of the building. And just people wanted to have them oriented towards the street. So there'd be a door facing the street, an entry. So we've gotten a lot of questions about, how did we decide where we were going to propose a neighborhood hub? And I should just back up and say initially we had proposed very few hubs when we put together the proposed comprehensive plan map. And what we heard from the community is that we were not proposing enough of them. We should allow it more broadly in the community. And so we came back and we did that. I think we tripled the number of hubs we were proposing. Neighborhood hubs is also one of the ideas that would support, again, the idea of a walkable neighborhood and help the city move towards its goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. So we did increase the number of proposed hubs, and so you'll see those 33 on the map today. And what we looked at when we were citing them were a lot of things. One was that we were trying to make sure that these really were neighborhood serving areas that were in kind of in the middle of kind of neighborhoods. So they were already kind of centers, so places that were near schools or parks or kind of other destinations, as opposed to just a random street. We also looked at making sure they were spaced apart from major corridors that have shops and services like Commercial Street. So we did try to space them at least a quarter mile, kind of a walkable distance, if not more, away from those major corridors. We looked at streets, and this is based on our survey that we did, that people wanted them at intersections and on busier streets, so not necessarily on local streets. So we looked for collectors and arterials to site them, and again at intersections. And then we looked at the transportation network. So where are sidewalks, where are there sidewalks or planned sidewalks, bike lanes, and bus routes, understanding that people would want to get to these hubs by bike, by bus, or by walking. So one of the questions, another question about the hub is, if we're proposing a neighborhood hub zone on an existing single-family home, does that home have to become a business? And the answer is no. The proposed zone would allow the same uses as a single-family zone. So even if it's a vacant piece of land, a single-family home could be developed, or if there's an existing one there, it could remain. It would just allow for small-scale businesses to establish there. Again, if the market really, the market demand was there. What I should have said, with the neighborhood hub, there were locations that were suggested by the community. And so we did take a look at those suggestions and see if they made sense. And we're open to other suggestions as well. One of the things we're doing as we're out and about in the community talking about hubs and the zoning is maybe we didn't get every location right. Are there other locations based on your knowledge of your neighborhood that would make more sense? Let's see. The R4 zone, getting a lot of questions about the R4 zone. The R4 zone, again, would be a new zone that would be similar to the single family zone in terms of the uses allowed, but would also allow live workspace on arterial streets. So a live workspace would be similar to our current allowance for home occupations, but it'd be a little different. So home occupations today are when a person like runs a small business out of their home. Maybe it's a beauty shop or it's their office, and it's really capped at roughly 25% of your home. So you would have to live there. You have to live there to run that business. And this is allowed throughout our single family zone today. The live work idea would not be allowed everywhere there's the R4 zone, but only on those arterial streets. And we would create greater flexibility in the amount of space you could use in your home. So it'd still have to be the person who lives there that runs that business, but you could, as proposed, you could use up to half of your house, for example. So that's one of the changes, or one of the differences. We're also working just with our building and safety folks to really understand kind of what this means in terms of the building code. And there are there is building code in terms of how big they could be. So we're going to see about potentially, making those obviously align. These are some photos that Austin took of, what a live work space could look like, where it's, again, as a single family home where there's a business in front that's run by the person that lives there. These also wouldn't be required. So where the R4 zone is proposed, you again could stay single family forever. But if the owner wanted to start a business, they could. This idea really came out of, again, the visioning phase, where we've heard that it's somewhat difficult and expensive to start a business, particularly if you're trying to lease a new space on Lancaster, for example. And so this idea is to help support entrepreneurs, small businesses, and the changing economy, understanding a lot of people are working from home, that in the future, potentially, there's a need to help support, again, people who want to start businesses. At the same time, these are located really on the edges of our neighborhoods, and they would create the opportunity for more small-scale shops and services near those neighborhoods. So again, kind of more walkable neighborhoods. And I see there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to maybe just address those after, if that's okay. So people have asked kind of what was the criteria used for looking at or potentially citing this R4. And we really looked at existing single family areas. So we're looking for, we weren't looking for multifamily or mixed use. This is really a kind of single family live workspace. And one of the areas where we're proposing it is where we currently have what's called our compact development overlay. So this is an overlay, for example, that is in Inner West Salem and on Market Street. And it currently allows denser housing, so housing on smaller lots. So it allows duplex, triplex, and single family on smaller lots that's then currently allowed. So we are proposing to eliminate overlays, a lot of overlays through this project. And so the R4 zone would replace that compact development overlay. In other locations, we were again looking for areas that where live workspace might make sense. So places where there's bus service, where there are sidewalks, or maybe bike lanes. We're looking again at major arterials, so not in the middle of neighborhoods, but along kind of the edges of neighborhoods. And then we looked really at the orientation of the homes that were already there. Homes that were facing the street, so it would make sense to have a business facing the street as opposed to an interior facing home. So I guess this kind of answers I already answered this question, but this was kind of why are we proposing the R4 zone in areas that are not on arterials? And again, it's really because that compact development overlay is going to become unnecessary once we implement House Bill 2001. Again, that's the law that's going to require us to allow duplex, triplex, fourplex townhouses and cottage clusters in the single family zone. So we are proposing to eliminate that and replace it with the R4 zone. Okay, so those are all the kind of frequently asked questions so far that we've been receiving from the community. We just wanted to kind of address those early on. And then I see that there's a lot of questions, so I will kind of look through them. Austin, do you want to help come on and answer and help me sort through these? That would be great.
Sure. Maybe I can read them and you can answer them. And I'll zoom back to the top and just see what is there.
Okay, some of them are comments, so let me just take a second.
Okay.
Okay. So the first question was about how we did our work generally, which I think I talked about. It really comes out of all of our visioning work over the last 2 years. Will the slides be made download? Yes, we will put them on the project website. And all like all of the policy meetings we've put online as well. And this recording will be available as well. Our total acres of needed multifamily housing is 207. No. Yeah, 207. That's our projected deficit that we're trying to meet. Have schools been notified and asked about their need for property? Yes, we've been working with the schools throughout this process. We've asked them for their input in terms of how our proposed changes would impact the need for schools and capacity. They did come back and tell us that they have a need for land for a new middle school, and that is a function not of the Our Salem project and proposed changes to the map, but a function of kind of a structural imbalance they already have in kind of the feeder system. And so we have gotten their input in terms of, where things should go, but it's not impacting their need for a new school beyond their needs that are already existed in terms of projections for needs. So there's a question about multifamily housing, and we are doing an analysis right now to see by not neighborhood, but kind of by region, like west versus south versus east versus north. How much multifamily land do we have, and how much are we proposing to add by area? And we will make that available when that analysis is done. We did a similar analysis, I think, 2 years ago. But at that point, we weren't proposing to add more multifamily land, so we're going to add that to the analysis. There's a question here about the planning review process. Lisa, do you want to take that one? It says over time, our review process is more complicated. Wait, I can't read the whole thing. 1 second.
Gave me the hard question, Eunice.
Oh, sorry,
Hi.
Lisa.
This is Lisa, planning administrator. Hi, Nate. I see your comment here. Hope you're doing well. I haven't seen you in a long time. Yeah, we've added more standards. I think your question here is really about bike racks. So it's been a priority of the council that we improve our standards for bicycle parking. So we recently adopted some new standards. We didn't increase the number, but we do require bike racks for all new uses that you establish anytime you change a use in a building or build a new building. And we recently updated the standards about how those bike racks are built and where they're placed on the site. And this kind of relates to one of the other questions I saw in there about if it's our goal to require everybody to abandon a car and start walking or biking. No, I wouldn't agree that that's our goal. Our goal is to provide choices for folks. So if they want to bike or walk, they have an opportunity to do that safely from wherever they're at, or coming from their house and going to their work or a business they're visiting. I think it's an overall city goal to provide a safe sidewalk, bike lane, bike paths, etc., for people to get there safely, and then have a place to safely lock up their bike and ensure that it's going to be there when they come back out. So I don't think there's any plan for us to roll back the bike parking requirements. Hopefully that answers that.
Thank you. Didn't mean to give you a hard one. There are a bunch of questions or comments about not supporting, and I'm assuming it's the hub. I apologize that I was talking when those came through. But there's a question here: why not put multi-housing in areas such as Old Cannery area by the river? We are proposing a mixed use in that area that would allow multifamily outright. And so again, we're looking for both areas that are currently developed that we could rezone to mixed use that would make it easier to do housing, so they could be reused or redeveloped. But in addition to that, we're looking for vacant land or partially vacant land for multifamily housing as well. This plan needs to be decided by individuals who don't live in infected areas. Hopefully, comment period will allow for input from actual owners. We did send out flyers to property owners that would be impacted earlier in this process when we were working on the higher level proposed comprehensive plan map. More recently, we sent out a postcard to all the property owners and business tenants that would be impacted by the proposed zoning changes as well. And so I've received lots of emails and phone calls. And we did that specifically because we do want to hear from property owners. That outreach, while targeted, is in addition to all the other outreach that we've been doing broadly in the community. But I hear that comment that, property owners.
I think it's fair to say as well, to be clear, the plan will be decided by the city council. So each section of town has a city councilor that represents them, and they live in that ward. So ultimately, this will either be approved, denied, amended by city council. So you have a representative representing your area that's familiar with your area.
Thanks. There's a question about parking along Arterials with R4 zoning. I guess that question is there parking everywhere where we have proposed R4 zoning? And the answer is no. We're looking for areas where people could get there, not necessarily by car. So we looked for bus routes, sidewalks, bike lanes, but we will go back and look at parking. That has been a concern that's been raised when it comes to R4. So there's a question about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to go on to the next one. If there was a question about property on Eola, next to Eola Ridge Park, related to the trees. So I just would say that we have tree preservation requirements on property across the city, especially for significant white oaks. And so those requirements would remain, whether it's single family or multifamily. So I just wanted to make that clear. And just a reminder that land that we're proposing to rezone, if it's vacant today or there's vacant portions of it, it's not really a decision between should it remain vacant versus should it be developed, for example, as apartments, because a lot of that land, all land in the city has a zoning designation today that would allow development under whatever that designation is. So I think that particular property might be RA or RS, so single family type zone.
Right.
So it's really about if the property owner chooses to develop it in the future or sell it for development, should that development be single family or should it be multifamily? Either way, the trees, the significant oaks would be protected. You wanted to add anything to that, Eunice? No. Okay.
No. So kind of so bus service. There's no bus service on Orchard Heights Road. Hub makes no sense out there. I'm not sure what hub you're referring to, but the neighborhood hubs are really meant to be neighborhood serving. So we were looking for, areas. Again, there's a lot of different things we considered. And I wish I could tell you it's an exact science, right? We just plugged everything in. There was a big computer program and spit everything out. But there's some, things we had to weigh in that. And one of that, again, is going to be your input. So the hub really, again, is meant to be in single family areas where people could walk there or bike there. And yes, and when it comes to bus service, we are working with Chariots, and they are starting their own long-range plan in the future. Sometime this year, we will be working with them to coordinate land use with them. Lisa?
No, yes,
Oh, okay.
I concur. No.
Oh, I didn't know if you're okay. Okay. What is the plan to deal with additional traffic in West Salem? We have very few major thoroughfares. There needs to be a solution to the existing traffic before additional vehicles are on the road. And so this kind of goes towards what we were talking about earlier about trying to propose mixed use areas where new housing could be served by new shops and services in West Salem. So not everyone had to get into their car and drive down Wallace and cross the bridge. There's obviously some mixed use in already shops like in the Edgewater area and in the kind of West Salem downtown area, but that's all very much concentrated in one area. So where we're proposing kind of new mixed use areas are further out. Do you want to add anything, Lisa or Julie? Nope. Great. Okay, moving on.
Parking requirements for uses in R4. That's the next question.
We're not proposing to require parking for a live workspace similar to how we don't require parking for a home occupation. And that's the current proposal. Why can't we reduce the number of distinct zones and enhance multi-use? We are trying to eliminate overlay zones and zones that haven't really been successful. So we're proposing, for example, to eliminate the neighborhood center mixed use that's in West Salem and replace it with mixed use. And there's a lot of overlays we're proposing to do the same to get rid of them. So I'd say that is one of the goals. Will we get down to 10? Probably not. Who was asking?
Who suggested the zoning? And so Paula's question was not general, it was very specific, asking who and how the suggested zoning was decided upon. So you're looking at the staff that's working on this project. So us. I mean, with input, I think Eunice did a good job of explaining for different zones what we were thinking of, where we were looking, what factors we were using. But this is the staff here. There's other city staff that aren't on this call that were also working on the project. Hopefully that answers your question, Paula.
And a consultant team.
Yes, and a consultant team.
Okay, let's see. How to oppose a change and prevent it? Can we really have an impact? I would say, yes, we wouldn't be asking for input from the community if we weren't going to consider it. That being said, if the whole community came out and said they didn't want any more multifamily housing, we would probably not get rid of all the proposed multifamily housing zones. we are trying to meet our need. There are state requirements to meet our need for housing. Ultimately, also there's opportunities beyond staff, obviously, to talk to counselors who will ultimately be voting on it. There will be public hearings where the community will have an opportunity to give input. I would say that throughout this whole process, we've been open to any input from the community over the since 2018, when we started the first phase of this project. We have done outreach across the community. Anyone's welcome to call me and email me anytime, even if you can't come to a meeting. So I hope that is clear. Let's see. Can you give ideas of metrics, reduce auto trips, trying to get a sense of level of analysis on transportation? Yeah, so we did look at indicators. So early in this process, again, going back to 2018, the first phase of this project was focused on what is the existing state of our community. And what we did is we asked the community, what are your priorities? What are the things you want to get out of this, or at least measure against? And so we had 20 indicators that were chosen by the community that we then measured our work against. So as we developed different options for the map, which we called scenarios, we then measured them against those indicators that, again, were chosen by the community. All that information is on our project website, so you can go back and look at how things performed. That includes transportation-related measures. In addition to that, we did a lot of modeling just related to transportation greenhouse gas emissions to see if we could reduce the emissions from vehicles. That model is not super sensitive to land use changes. And so one of the things we're doing now is there's a whole zoning subcommittee focused on what code changes can we make to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So yes, there's a lot of different outcomes or indicators that we've been using.
Go back, go back, go back.
Sorry, I'm reading.
So there's a question by Brian about a zone change and if it would affect if someone had, for example, like a fire. His example is a house in a general commercial zone is destroyed by a fire. It can't be rebuilt, and this affects insurance. I don't think that's correct. I think all of our commercial and industrial zones today allow existing houses to be rebuilt if they're destroyed. So I think that's already there. And so, yes, it's definitely our intent. And I think the new zones Eunice was talking about, the neighborhood hub, for example, in the R4, would just allow housing outright. So it's not a matter of, are you it's not going to be that the house is non-conforming or you need any special provision. It would just be a permitted use. And so the house could be rebuilt. Hopefully that answers that question.
And one of the things we're doing in our newer zones, our mixed use zones that were recently created, as well as the mixed use 3 zone that we're proposing to create, would allow for what we call continued uses. So if your use is there today, you can stay there, you can be improved, and you can rebuild. And so that is something that we've heard from the community throughout projects that we've worked on, and is something we're addressing through this kind of continued use idea.
So the next question is about multifamily land in West Salem and the lack of the third bridge. So yeah, the council, I think this is touched on, ultimately decided not to support the third bridge project. It's still an identified project in our transportation plan, so potentially could be a project in the future. But the current council was clear that the third bridge is not a project that they're moving forward. And so it doesn't mean that then therefore our housing needs go away just because there's not a third bridge. So we still, as Eunice has said, have a state obligation to provide land for housing. And so some of that will be hopefully mixed use land on our major streets, but some of that's going to have to be on vacant multifamily land. And there's only so much land in the city to pick from. So that's why we are picking, certain parcels, right? We just have to pick land. And I think Eunice went through and talked about what we looked at when we were picking land. So unless you want to add to that, Eunice.
No. Next question is, has it been determined that the UGB has adequate supply of buildable land? Yes. There's 2 studies that are really the basis of this work in terms of our future needs. That's the housing needs analysis and the economic opportunities analysis. And so those combined show that we have enough land within the current urban growth boundary, but it's not designated, the land is not designated for the right uses based on our projected need. And that's why we are going through, and again, looking for more multifamily land as an example.
Gene has a question. He wants to know if planning truly thinks there's a traffic issue in West Salem. I definitely, there's a congestion issue at certain times of the day, but maybe Julie Warnicki, our transportation planning manager, wants to answer this one.
I guess I would agree with Lisa that yes, there are, traffic considerations, traffic issues in West Salem that result in congestion at peak periods. I'm not quite sure what specific area is being asked about, if it's the bridge or Wallace Road or a particular intersection. So without more detail.
So there's a comment about Mildred Lane. I've received a lot of emails and calls about Mildred Lane and R4. We will take another look at that. You can vote by calling and emailing me, which folks have done, or putting pins on the map, which folks have done as well.
But to be clear, it's not a vote. It's right. Input we're receiving. We'll take that input and then consider making changes, and then we'll have a final map that we propose that will go through public hearings. Again, like Ina said, at the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council.
There's a comment that property owners didn't receive any word about this. We did send out multiple mailings to affected property owners and business tenants to let them know. Okay. And I have gotten some calls from people who live near affected areas, and we did not do a citywide mailing saying that your zone's going to be proposed, there's going to be a proposed zone change on your property or near your property. We have done citywide outreach in numerous ways, like utility bill inserts, which we're going to do another one in July to let the broader community know. But we wanted to specifically let property owners know that there's a proposed change that could impact their property. Same question, same comment, same comment.
Question about the Truett property and making it mixed use. Is this in North Downtown, Truett property, or West Salem? Truett property in West Salem? So the North Downtown property is already mixed use. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, Nate. It's mixed use. It's been mixed use since the 90s. It still is allowed to have industrial uses there. New industrial uses are allowed to go into the existing buildings. Not as many as in the old zoning for sure, but there is a provision that the buildings can be reused for new industrial uses until such time that somebody determines it's feasible to make it mixed use. So hopefully that answers the question.
So there's a lot of people saying they didn't hear about changes in their neighborhood, and hopefully address that. Says again, a neighborhood near Eola Ridge were not notified about the change. And again, we did not email or did not send a postcard to all property owners across the city. I appreciate neighbors and neighborhood associations and others who are helping spread the word. One of the things we heard from the West Salem Neighborhood Association is that we should put something again in the West Side newspaper, which we did. They've been very gracious to let us do that.
So somebody's asking how to know about the future public meetings. So if you go onto the website for this project, you can get on the mailing list and then you'll receive all kinds of emails. I do want to clarify, we did do a citywide mailer at the beginning of this project to let people know about it and give them the opportunity to get on the mailing list. So some people have been on the email list from the very beginning. And as Una said, has done utility bill inserts. It's been in the Statesman Journal. It's been in the Salem Reporter numerous times. It's been on the radio, been in the West Side paper. So we have been doing broad outreach to get it out there. But if you want to know specifically if you're a property owner, you would get an official notice. If you live near an area that might be rezoned and you want to be sure to know about the public meeting, then definitely go to the website and sign up and get on the mailing list for the Our Salem project, and then you'll definitely be kept informed that way.
There's more multifamily. There's a question about what are all the proposed zone changes, and so those are on the map. You can go through and look at them. There's a PDF version if you want to download that. It's the interactive map. If you don't want to use the interactive map as well.
So somebody's asking about property on Fawn Street, northwest off of Glen Creek. I'm not exactly sure if this is part of an Our Salem project, or it sounds like maybe a developer's already proposing multifamily there. I'm not sure. Question is about cutting down trees to put in apartments. So again, the city already has citywide rules and regulations that cover tree preservation and tree replanting that are applied to projects in any zone, and would continue to apply to projects. I'm not sure if that answers that question.
So there's a question about using your property as you're using it now. Yes, existing. So no one's forcing anyone to change how they use their property. If a proposed zone change, if it went through, would allow you to use reuse or redevelop your property under the new code, under the new zone that's applied to your property. But if you have an existing use, you can continue doing that. I think some of these are in response to comments maybe we said. Why propose a hub when existing neighborhood commercial is 1 mile away? So we did look at distance from existing commercial areas when we were citing the neighborhood hubs. As I mentioned, we were not looking at a mile. Quarter mile is considered walkable distance, and so we're looking at a smaller spacing than a mile. A mile is a long way for some folks, and so we're looking to potentially allow for smaller shops and services closer than that.
Victor has a question about the proposed rezoning to mixed use on commercial Liberty and how one side is staying commercial office on Liberty. Asking why. Between Mission and rural. I have to look.
I'm gonna have to get back. Yeah, I'm gonna get back to you, Victor, if that's okay. Oh, Austin, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
So east of, there's a portion close, just south of downtown on Liberty that we're proposing to keep as commercial office because of the current way it's been developed and the way it's being used, as well as its interface with the adjacent neighborhood and the historic district. And so it seemed like, or we made a choice not change to mixed use for that section of Liberty. But again, if people want to comment on that, on the interactive map, we're open to ideas.
Thanks, Austin. Next question was about transit and the idea of using smaller buses in areas like South Salem. So I think Eunice covered the fact that we're working with transit. They're beginning a new long-range project themselves to look at their future operations. They just in the last few years got more money to improve their operations. So we're working closely with them, and they're looking at all different options to better serve Salem.
Yeah, they're also, oh, go ahead, Julie. Are you talking about the transit center?
Well, I was going to actually talk about that I know that they are applying for some grant funding for some smaller buses to maybe start implementing those. But it's a complex decision, involving operations and other stuff like that. And so the transit district is very much aware of that issue. And I'd encourage people to connect in with Chariots as well. As Eunice mentioned earlier, they're going to be starting their long-range transit plan in the next few months. And then they are also they are working on a South Salem Transit Center planning study right now that will be also having outreach in the next several months.
And I know as part of their future work, they're looking at other types of buses and mobility options beyond kind of the standard bus. So we have talked to them about that. I'm going to scroll through. It looks like there's 50 some comments that I haven't looked at. Let's see.
So I just wanted to jump in on one other thing with the transit. I saw some comments about areas where multifamily is proposed that doesn't currently have transit service. And, you know, there definitely is a, you know, chicken and an egg issue, right? Because transit cannot very well effectively and efficiently serve, you know, areas with very low population density. It makes it much more difficult for them to serve it. And so, you know, if you only put the multifamily where they are currently today, it makes it harder for them to grow into other areas. And so if we zone other areas for multifamily, that actually gives them something to reach towards as they look to extend and expand their use in the future.
So there's a question that someone didn't receive a mailing, so they're not believing us. So if anyone didn't receive a mailing, feel free to let me know. We do have a mailing list. We're relying on the assessor's mailing list. So if that information is accurate, that is who we sent it to. Okay, let's see.
Let's see.
I'm going to see if there's others beyond kind of citing a multifamily, which I feel like we addressed.
Somebody's asking if their house could be remodeled if their property was zoned mixed use, major remodeling, major renovations. So you're saying if we rezone it to mixed use and it's single family today? Yes, the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Yes. I was feeding that up for you to.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm just reading comments.
Somebody has a question about the R4 and how much of the home can be used for a business, changing from 25% to 50%.
Yes, we just talked on the phone. Yes, to 50%. Does it include the garage as living space?
Oh,
That's a good question. I want to say yes.
I think it does. I think that's how we already calculate it today.
For home occupation.
Yeah, we can double check that, Jim, and maybe post that with the R4 information. Okay. But I believe that we already count the garage today as part of the living space.
So I think maybe we've gotten through most of the questions. More about multifamily.
So there's some comments about basically,
go ahead.
That multifamily shouldn't be in West Salem because it's too far from the center of town. So again, it's not just placing multifamily. The idea is to make new services in West Salem, and then the multifamily would be near to it. You know, someone also asked about equity of putting more multifamily in West Salem. The large majority of the existing multifamily historically has been in Northeast Salem, right? So there is a need to spread multifamily out across the city. And some of that includes land in West Salem and South Salem. This kind of goes back to the school district question someone had asked at the beginning about working with the school district. The only thing that really the school district asked us to do is to make sure that multifamily was not concentrated in Northeast Salem because of the massive impact that has on the high schools and the overcrowding of the schools there. Then it needs to be spread throughout town so the schools can better serve the students that are living in apartments. So that is one of our goals, is to make sure that it's spread more throughout town.
Eunice, I saw a question asking if potentially we could post answers to some of these questions online later after the meeting. Is that something we could do?
Is it something? Yes, we could do something like that. Put together like maybe we'll take the FAQ as a starter and add some questions, kind of consolidating some of these. That will take some time, so I would ask for some patience as we pull that together.
So somebody clarified that their question about the property behind Bond Street in West Salem off of Glen Creek is proposed to go from single family to multifamily, and how does that address climate change? So I just want to clarify, maybe Eunice wants to jump in on this, but addressing climate change is not the only goal. There's a lot of competing goals, factors, state requirements that we have to address in this plan. So we're trying to balance all of those things. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, putting those apartments on that property is going to reduce GHG emissions, right? That's not what we're saying. And so, like Eunice said, we're trying to rezone our core areas and our major streets to mixed use, try to concentrate more multifamily housing there so people can have access to services. But also, there is a state requirement that we provide enough land for multifamily housing for our need. And so we have to do both of those things. And so it's balancing. And so we've, I think I know what property you're talking about now. We received a lot of comments on that property. So we will go back and take a look at it, and on every property that folks have commented on the map and in this forum. And we'll look at them, and maybe make some changes, definitely based on comments, but it can't be that the change is no apartments, no multifamily in West Salem, right? Because then the city itself won't meet its need that's required by state law. So we're just trying to balance a lot of factors. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
And Austin, do you know there's a question about Sumter Elementary and the adjacent parks? Do you know what change they're speaking about?
Give me 1 minute and I'll see if I can.
Okay. Oh, Jim, yes, there's a question about the PSU forecast. We did meet with PSU, was that last week now?
Yeah.
And they found some errors in their assumptions. And they've also taken our data to update kind of what our assumptions are, or their assumptions are in terms of future development. So they are redoing the work, and they're going to come out with a final proposal in a couple of weeks. Is that right, Lisa?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so big picture, Jim, they are going to, the forecast will go up from their current projection, which is very low and basically showed us not growing and just flatlining, which, as you all know, we've seen a lot of development in the Salem area. We are definitely seeing growth. So yes, when that's final, we'll put that out. I'm sorry, what was there?
So there's still a lot of comments about notice. So I'm not sure how more clear we can be. We did send notice to every person that's proposed to be rezoned. We did not send notice to people that live next to those properties. We've been working for 3 years on this project with broad kind of notice throughout the community in the ways that we've listed about the project. It's had numerous meetings at City Council, lots of public meetings. Eunice has been to every single neighborhood association and a huge list of community partners where she's presented on the project. So we're not saying if you live next door to a proposed rezone that we sent you notice. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if we propose to rezone you, we sent you notice. So I just want to clarify because there seems to be a lot of comments still asking about that. Austin, Sumter Elementary?
Yes. So previously or currently that whole area is zoned RA. Schools and parks are allowed in the RA zoning, but in our conversations with the district, as well as with our folks in the Parks and Recreation Department, we were asked to change the school property itself, the one that's owned by the district, to the public and private education zone, and the park portion that is owned by the city to be changed to PA, which is our parks zone. And then there's a small portion that was left over and is currently developed with housing, and we changed that to single family to match the rest of that property that was already zoned single family.
Thanks, Austin. And I should clarify, I should add that one of the other things we're doing as part of this process is looking at where there are conflicts between our current comp plan and our zoning map and trying to clean those up for people, because as people try to develop their property, if there's a mismatch, it gets real complicated. And so we're incorporating that work. So if you see kind of like a one-off, why is this one property changing or this, part of it could just because we're trying to clean up so that they're consistent, the comp plan and the zoning map. And then we did reach out to, the school district and others about, in the state about properties as well. Okay, there's another question. Let's see. There's a question about impact to wildlife in Gibson Creek. We are taking another look at that area. We've received a lot of comments about kind of the development being too close to that creek and the wildlife there. So we are taking a second look at that.
One's asking about in-person meetings. Oh, I hope. With the first few years of this project were in-person meetings, and I think they were a lot better. Until, the world gets better, the project is going to keep going like this. We haven't heard when City Hall will be opening, maybe soon, as more people get vaccinated and the COVID cases drop in the county, then hopefully City Hall will open and then we'll have an opportunity to have more in-person meetings. So stay tuned. That is what we would like to get back to for sure. So someone's talking about the school district. To be clear, we've worked with the planners at the school district, the superintendent, and the COO. So whether or not an individual principal or facility manager at a school knows about it, we can't comment on that. We're working though with the school district, and they have reviewed the plans and are concurring again that property used as schools should be zoned for schools, and on the city side, property used as parks should be zoned for parks. So that's a cleanup that we're making.
I think Julie answered and Lisa answered the bridge question. There's another question about building a bridge to accommodate an increase in traffic. I don't know if we need to add more to that.
There's some comments on here about multifamily. I just want to say there's a huge portion of our community that either chooses to live in apartments or can only afford to live in apartments. And it's our obligation as a city to provide land for those units to be built. Not only is it our obligation under state law, but it's really the right thing to do. As someone that grew up in Salem in apartments, I'm kind of offended by your comment that if I think apartments are great, I should go live in them. I've spent a lot of my time living in apartments in Salem. A lot of people need to live in apartments in Salem. I think that's a really inappropriate comment for you to put.
Am I missing any other questions?
There's a question about a potential additional pedestrian bridge from West Salem to Salem. Julie, I don't know that we have any plans.
Yeah. Beyond the Union Street?
I don't believe there are no adopted plans for an additional pedestrian bridge to West Salem at this time. Might have been something in the parks plan from many years ago as a conceptual alignment to the south. But there is no movement, you could say, towards making that happen. There are plans for separated crossing, Road, Street, Bridge, sort of alignment, 2nd Street. However, that's not funded. Expensive proposition.
So you cut out a little bit there, Julie, but what I think I heard you, did everybody else hear Julie clearly? No, maybe it wasn't super clear, but what I think I heard you say is there's nothing adopted right now for another pedestrian bridge. There was conceptual plans to maybe do in the south part, so on the opposite side of maybe Minto Bridge, The city does have a plan to make it easier to cross Wallace from 2nd Street to get to the Union Railroad Bridge, but that plan is not funded right now, but there is a plan the city's trying to move forward with. Yeah, okay, good. Oh, Dave has asked a few times about speed bumps on Mildred Lane. I think under current policy, it's not eligible for speed bumps because of the classification, although there's always lots of concerns across town from these major streets, collectors and minor arterials about wanting speed bumps. That maybe is a policy that could be changed in the future, but currently it's not eligible for speed bumps.
It's not eligible, and it has to do with emergency response on our arterials, as well as snow and ice response. And particularly when you get into the hilly areas on arterials, we need to have those sort of lifeline routes that can be plowed. Speed humps, we can no longer plow the streets. So there are many reasons for that policy.
And there's a question about homeless city not being able to take care of our homeless population. And I think that the city is doing a lot to try to address the needs of our unsheltered population, whether it's asking for money from the state to build a new navigation center, looking at changing our code to allow different types of housing and tiny homes, et cetera, in the city, to partnering obviously with agencies across the city. And I think that if you have heard Gretchen Bennett with this city, she does a great job at kind of summarizing all the things that we're trying to do and the limitations that the city has and on what we can do. But I think one of the things she also mentions in a lot of meetings with her is that, you know, part of it does have to do with our need for housing and the type of housing we have. And, you know, building just single family homes on all of the rest of our land that is vacant isn't going to meet that need. And so I appreciate concerns and questions around our unsheltered population, but I would say the city is trying to do a lot. Are there any other questions? Did I miss any? Okay. And I agree that this feels a little one-sided because it's not in person. We're doing our best.
Eunice, I saw a question about our proposed zoning and the terrain in these various areas. So I just wanted to say that we recognize that there are some challenging areas out there in terms of terrain. We know that there are some slopes and that does affect how people can build. We have been all over the city as a staff, and we've seen these areas, and we recognize that in some places there will be some topography that needs to be navigated, but that is something we're considering, and I appreciate that comment.
I was going to say, I think Lisa would say that there's also grading that happens. So there's been a lot of development on what is steep slopes. A lot of our available land is on steep slopes. It's in West Salem and it's in South Salem. And we've seen, you know, the natural terrain change to accommodate those developments. I'm not saying that we want to put all of our, you know, housing or all of our new development on steep slopes, but it has happened, right? That's where a lot of our vacant land is today. I would just like to reiterate, if we could, and we are trying to incentivize redevelopment and reuse of existing properties along our commercial corridors and in areas that are already developed. We are, you know, our whole zoning subcommittee is really focused on those corridors. Can we incentivize through parking or increased heights or, you know, incentives, redevelopment and more housing along those corridors and in the downtown? You know, we are looking at that. So I hope it doesn't seem like that's not a priority. It is a priority. We are trying to get development in those areas.
Eunice, somebody's asking what their next opportunity to participate in a meeting would be.
We'll be here again tonight at 5:30. We'll be going over the same frequently asked questions, but you're welcome to come back and ask more questions. And then again, we're proposing to, oops, I guess I didn't go through the rest of the presentation. We are proposing to close the map for comments on June 11th. That doesn't mean that property owners, residents, neighborhood associations, anyone can't continue to give input to me through, or to any of us through email or phone calls. But at some point, we do want to take the input from the map and actually analyze it and see what changes we could propose based on some of the input. So the goal is to then revise the map, present that to the community before we go through a formal adoption process. We're targeting a work session with the city council for October. That's tentative. So we would want to go to the city council and we've typically done it with a joint work session with the planning commission where we would present kind of here's the proposed zoning, the proposed comprehensive plan, the goals, the policies, the map to them and get their feedback before we start an official adoption process. So I don't anticipate the official adoption process starting until the end of the year and then stretching into next year. This webinar it is being recorded and it will be available and is available on our YouTube page. And then we will put this presentation as a PDF as well on our project page. We are constantly adding information to our project page and we're sending out emails. So again, if you want to be on that email list, just sign up and you'll see all the updates. Just really quickly, I'll get back to the chat. I wanted to say that beyond zoning, we are working on a lot of other things, including the policies. And so we have our last policy meeting next week, and that's when we'll be kind of bringing back. These are some of the big ideas that we heard. And then the zoning subcommittee. So I just touched on that. The zoning subcommittee is made up of 4 planning commissioners and 4 city councilors. They had their first meeting on April 30th, and they're meeting again on May 27th. They are focusing on 6 specific code changes that could help reduce greenhouse gas emissions to do just what I was talking about, kind of incentivize development, infill, redevelopment, and more housing along our major corridors that are served by transit. So they are looking at those options. And so those meetings are open to the public as well. You can submit comments to send to them in advance of the meetings, and you can sign up in advance of them to speak at those meetings. Is there any other side? And this is my contact information. I welcome phone calls, emails, anytime. I will get back to you. I try to respond to every email that I get. And this is a project website where we have the survey that's online on policies. That's where you can find the interactive map. You can find information about all of our meetings, our Zoom links, our documents. I know it's a lot of information, so if there's something specific you're trying to find and you cannot find it, let us know. We had a request recently to put like the chats up from all of our policy meetings. And so after these meetings and after this meeting, we will save the chat and we will put that online. So if you want to go through the questions again and see what people were saying, you can. Or if you're watching from home and you're not on a Zoom call, but you're watching on YouTube, you can see what the chat is that we're kind of going through now.
And just lastly, if you had a question or comment and you didn't want to put it in the chat or, feel uncomfortable or something, please definitely email Eunice and then she can answer it by email or talk on the phone with you. So we want to make sure people have an opportunity to get their questions answered and find the information they're looking for.
I don't see anything else. Austin or Julie or anyone, is there anything else that I'm missing that you want to add? Feel free to come back at 5:30.
I would just add that we are still conducting outreach with community groups. And so if there's a group in the community that you would like us to come talk with, we are happy.
Dad, you gotta turn that down.
Arrange a meeting, schedule something so that we can talk more specifically about an issue if that's something you want to do with a group that you're a part of.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that reminder. Yeah, we're always going to meetings. So whether it's your neighborhood association or just a group you're involved in, or you just want to have a call with us, we're happy to set those up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank everybody for coming and for their comments and input, and just reiterate what Eunice has said numerous times, that nothing is final. We're still in the outreach phase and definitely looking for comments and feedback, and everybody will have an opportunity to continue to provide that feedback even after the map closes, the online map, and then all through the adoption process. So definitely don't feel like today or in the next week or something is your only time to get in your comments. There's still lots of opportunity for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.